The past 3 days, we have covered the intention of renunciation. We have started with describing the way of the teaching is contrary to the way of the world, but we don't have to live the household life on the spot because of we have different dispositions and situations. Then at some point, we realize that even when we try to let go of attachment, we encounter a powerful inner resistance. Then we should ask ourselves, how can we break the shackles of desire? The first method, the Buddha does not offer the method of repression. Instead, it offers us the method of understanding. Then we need to ask again how to understand desire so that it can loosen its hold. We need to see that desire is bound up with dukkha, with suffering, and then we start to investigate the whole cycle of desire. All the way, when we scrutinize closely, when we investigate, we see that desire starts from all the way, from the pain of one, the moment it springs, and to end this suffering, to end the pain of this sense of lack, we struggle to fulfill our desire. Then when we struggle to fulfill our desire, it can go two ways. If we fail, then we will feel frustrated. But even if it's successful, it will fuel the cycle further. We worry that we might lose ground, and then we want to secure our position, gain tighter control, and we want it to last forever. So what is the issue with that? Back again to the objects of the desire are impermanent. When we hold on to something impermanent, and when that thing itself becomes impermanent, then that is where we will have suffering. Because there is still a gap between what we want and how it is. Yeah. One quick example, let's say my phone currently, if suddenly I drop my phone and then the screen cracks, that is a lot of suffering. Okay, and then there is also another angle of looking at desire, is that we can differentiate qualitatively between different activities. So to move from desire to renunciation is not as might be imagined, to move from happiness to grief, from abundance to destitution. It is to pass from gross, entangling pleasures to an exalted happiness and peace, from a condition of servitude to one of self-mastery. We can easily compare this, like, the fact that we are all here, we find some kind of a happiness that is different from, we can all just sleep in until 10 a.m. But we all choose to wake up early, meditate, and read the Noble Eightfold Path. So for me, this kind of happiness is much higher, much exalted than me just sleeping in all the way until 10 a.m. Yeah. So this is one way to see the qualitative difference between activities and what kind of happiness that it gives you. So sadhu to all of us for choosing the exalted happiness. Okay, and then today we will start to explore the intention of goodwill. So what is exactly the intention of goodwill? We will find out for today and the next few days. The intention of goodwill opposes the intention of ill will, thoughts governed by anger and aversion. As in the case of desire, there are two ineffective ways of handling ill will. One is to yield to it, to express the aversion by bodily or verbal action. This approach releases the tension, helps drive the anger out of one's system. But it also poses certain dangers. It breeds resentment, provokes retaliation, creates enemies, poisons relationships, and generates unwholesome karma. In the end, the ill will does not leave the system after all, but instead is driven down to a deeper level where it continues to vitiate one's thoughts and conduct. The other approach, repression, also fails to dispel the destructive force of ill will. It merely turns that force around and pushes it inward, where it becomes transmogrified into self-contempt, chronic depression, or a tendency to irrational outbursts of violence. So firstly, let's define two words. Firstly, vitiate. Vitiate means vitiate, okay. To spoil or impair the quality or efficiency of. To destroy or impair the legal validity of. So let's go back to this sentence. So ill will continues to destroy or impair one's thoughts and conduct. And second word would be transmogrify.
Transmogrify.
Transmogrify. Transform in a surprising or magical manner. Okay, so ill will becomes or transform into self-contempt, chronic depression, or tendency to irrational outbursts of violence. Yes, this paragraph, I think it also links to a popular notion of venting. Like there is one popular way of trying to, as this sentence says, drive the anger out of one system. I think the term is called venting. I recall Singapore has this kind of service where you enter some kind of business that actually let you enter into a room, and then you can wear all the safety gear, and then you are free to break all the stuff in your room. In the room, you are free to use a bat and then hit all the furniture or the TV inside. Yeah, and then you have to pay after you finish. So I think that is also, yeah, do you guys know it? Have you guys heard of it before? No? Some of you, yes. Some of you know, yeah. We can find out later. But this is, I guess, the worldly way, or the most people's way of driving anger, by venting into supposedly harmless activity. But this paragraph mentioned, even after you finish venting, it does not really solve the root problem. Yeah. Yes, that is one way. The second way is again a repression, which is also explored in the previous section, the intention of renunciation. Yeah, but it also fails to solve the root problem. It pushes it inward, where it becomes transmogrified into self-contempt, depression, and outbursts of violence. And some of you can recall people around you who actually have this kind of outbursts of violence. So maybe you can share this section to them. Okay, before I continue, any question or comments? Okay. If not, then maybe Sister Dita, would you like to read?
Start from the remedy. The Buddha recommends to counteract ill will, especially when the object is another person, is a quality called in Pali metta. This word derives from another word meaning friend, but metta signifies much more than ordinary friendliness. I prefer to translate it by the compound loving kindness, which best captures the intended sense. An intense feeling of selfless love for other beings, radiating outwards as a heartfelt concern for their well-being and happiness. Metta is not just sentimental goodwill, nor is it a conscientious response to a moral imperative or divine command. It must become a deep inner feeling characterized by spontaneous warmth rather than by a sense of obligation. As its peak, Metta rises to the heights of Brahma Vihara, a divine dwelling, a total way of being centered on the radiant wish for the welfare of all living beings.
Okay, thank you, Dita. Okay, firstly, let us define conscientious.
Conscientious.
Conscientious. The first definition, wishing to do one's work or duty well and thoroughly, diligent, painstaking. Second definition, relating to a person's conscience. It feels like more like the second definition, relating to one's conscience. So what is conscience? Let's define conscience. A person's moral sense of right and wrong, viewed as acting as a guide to one's behavior. So it is not, in this paragraph, it is not a conscious response to a moral imperative or divine command. It must become a deep inner feeling characterized by spontaneous warmth rather than by a sense of obligation. So at its peak, it rises to the height of Brahma Vihara, divine dwelling, a total way of being centered on the radiant wish for the welfare of all living beings. Yes. So this paragraph introduces metta, and in below paragraph, we will explore deeper into metta. Okay, who would like to read next? How about Esther? Would you like to read?
The kind of love implied by metta should be distinguished from sensual love as well as from the love involved in personal affection. The first is a form of craving, necessarily self-directed, while the second still includes a degree of attachment. We love a person because that person gives us pleasure, belongs to our family or group, or reinforces our own self-image. Only rarely does the feeling of affection transcend all traces of ego reference, and even then its scope is limited. It applies only to a certain person or group of people while excluding others.
Okay, thanks, Esther. So this one, firstly, we distinguish metta from our usual notion of love. The first one, sensual love. So sensual love is just a form of craving and self-directed. And the second one includes degree of attachment. We love a person because that person gives us pleasure, belongs to our family group, and reinforces our own self-image. So this is more feels like egoistic kind of love. Like, I love you because you are mine. You know, there's a self-reference to it. So only rarely does the feeling of affection transcends all traces of ego reference, and even then its scope is still limited. It applies only to a group of people that is close to me, that I care about. I asked Shifu this question before, like, how do I differentiate compassion and sadness? Because I heard the news that my friend contracted a cancer So immediately when I heard the news, my tear just sheds. And so then I asked Shifu, oh, is that sadness? Is that sadness compassion, or is it just sadness? How do I differentiate between these two? Then Shifu's reply was, that is, when I mention it is my friend, then it is a discriminative kind of sadness or compassion. Let's say if it's a stranger having cancer, I would probably not feel as sad compared to when my friend is having a cancer. Yeah. So it is discriminatory because I only apply this to my friend. But if we can apply this, if we can transcend our ego reference, then we will feel it no matter whether it's our friends or some strangers in the world. Yes. So we have covered 3 paragraphs. Any questions so far or any comments? And I'd also like to say welcome to Waken. He's joining us all the way from Malaysia. Sadhu. From Putra Heights Buddhist Society. Wow. So Waken, would you like to quickly introduce yourself?
Oh, sure. Namo Buddhaya, everyone.
Namo Buddhaya.
Good morning. Yes. Hi, everyone. My name is Wei Ken. I think some of you might already know me. Yes, I'm from Malaysia. I'm from the Putra Heights Buddhist Society Youth Fellowship. And sometimes I join the Buddhist Fellowship Youth Singapore as well. There's Saturday service. Yes. Yeah,
Hello.
it's good to... Hello. Yes, Hadita. Nice to see you again. Yeah, so it's nice to meet you guys. And I hope to be able to continue joining this learning opportunity. Yep.
Okay, good to have you. Good to have you. Welcome, welcome. And are you like the president of your society, Putra Heights?
No. I'm not. I'm not in the sort of main exco. I suppose the executive committee. I suppose I am in the sort of youth fellowship committee in a sense. It's not straightforward, right? We don't really have an official sort of committee team, but yeah, I'm in the youth fellowship. I mainly lead the youth group.
Yes. Yep. So from what I know, Waken is very enthusiastic in joining all activities in Buddhism, and sometimes he attends Shifu class as well, occasionally once or twice. Yeah, and whenever he attends, he always brings his army to attend. Like all his friends will join him, you know. You recall something like Venerable Sariputra, when he goes anywhere, all 500 people joining him. And when Venerable Sariputra ordained, all these 500 friends go ordain with him. So Waken reminds me of Venerable Sariputra.
Not yet reach 500. Not yet reach 500. Not even 5 sometimes. But yeah, we're getting there. We're getting there. One day.
Okay, that's good. I like your spirit. Okay. Maybe we can let our guest from Malaysia read the next one.
Awesome. Awesome. All right. The love involved in metta, in contrast, does not hinge on particular relations to particular persons. Here, the reference point of self is utterly omitted. We are concerned only with suffusing others with a mind of loving kindness, which ideally is to be developed into a universal state, extended to all living beings without discriminations or reservations. The way to impart to metta this universal scope is to cultivate it as an exercise in meditation. Spontaneous feelings of goodwill occur too sporadically and are too limited in range to be relied on as the remedy for aversion. The idea of deliberately developing love has been criticized as contrived, mechanical, and calculated. Love, it is said, can only be genuine when it is spontaneous, arisen without inner prompting or effort. But it is a Buddhist thesis that the mind cannot be commanded to love spontaneously. It can only be shown the means to develop love and enjoined to practice accordingly. At first, the means has to be employed with some deliberation, but through practice, the feeling of love becomes ingrained, grafted onto the mind as a natural and spontaneous tendency.
Thanks, Regan. Okay, maybe let's define some difficult word here. Suffusing. Suffuse means gradually spread through or over. Her cheeks was suffused with color. So that's one. So here in this sentence, we are concerned only with suffusing others with the mind of loving kindness, with metta, which ideally is to be developed to a universal state. It tends to all living beings, not just humans, also animals, without discrimination or reservations. If you recall the example of my friend having cancer, that was kind of discrimination because it's directed towards my friend, not all living beings. So one way to cultivate metta here, it says that we can exercise it in meditation. Sometimes we have spontaneous feelings of goodwill, but it occurs sporadically and are limited in range to be relied and too limited in range to be relied as the remedy of aversion, of ill will. So any questions or comments before we wrap up for today? Not just this paragraph, but the whole 4 paragraphs that we read.
I have a question, right?
Yes,
on the last paragraph. Is Venerable here trying to say that we need to actually develop this loving kindness? In a way, it's like, if let's say it's not spontaneous, right? So we should try to bring it up. So through meditation and maybe in daily life. And then so it's in a way, it sounds to me like initially it can be a bit artificial, you fake it if you can, and then you slowly develop. I'm not sure whether this is the idea that's coming up from this paragraph.
That's a good question. Thanks, Billy. I feel like the point of this paragraph feels like metta is a skill or something that can be developed rather than something that, where people have the idea of the romantic love, where in the media, when they meet girls or they meet their partners and they feel some kind of feelings or affection. I think what Venerable is trying to say is not exactly that way, but it is something that if we intentionally, skillfully develop in a meditation, it can become our second nature. So I'm not sure if that makes sense. And how about others? Do you guys have additional comments to Billy's questions?
That might be a concern for some people. Like, is this sort of like fake love, right? Like it's artificial. I like the word Sister Billy used. Like, is it too artificial, or is it genuine love, right? I like to think that I think what Marcel said is true, right? Like, firstly, love is a skill. Metta is a skill that can be developed. It's a bit similar to, I guess, maybe how you go to the gym to strengthen your muscles or something. And then like you can also strengthen this skill of love, or how you practice any skill, right? Practicing a skill in life, whether it's a music skill or sports and so on. Secondly, I wanted to say that loving kindness is also an intention. So, and we are intentionally wanting to love someone. We're intentionally wanting to have that goodwill for someone, and that itself, that intention to want to think kind thoughts and want to act in kindness towards someone, I think that intention itself is genuine love. Like, it's a real intention. In terms of developing and training this skill, I would say we are creating and generating the conditions for the intention of loving kindness to more easily arise, I suppose, because all intentions and all conditioned things arise from conditions. And for some of us, if we are not, we're not very strongly or very naturally sort of predisposed to loving kindness, then yeah, sometimes the conditions might not be there for it to arise. So I would say, in the practice of loving kindness, we are generating and creating more and more conditions so that, yeah, loving kindness can more easily arise. So two things I would say. Number one, the intention is genuine love. And number two, as a practice, we are creating more conditions so that the intention can arise more easily.
Okay, thanks, Megan. So does that make sense, Billy?
Yeah, indeed, yes, very much so. Thank you, brother. Just one thing that came up from my mind when I'm asking this question, right? I certainly relate to Ajahn Brahm when he teaches meditation. He tends to, I didn't attend a lot, but I attended like 2. He tends to start with, the metta meditation. He starts with the kitty that get hurt and all that. So when initially I got exposed to that, I was like, wow, why? Okay, in the first place, I love cat. So it's like, why start with this? Because I have not exposed to this. But now when I read this paragraph and relate to that, I think that makes a lot of sense, because it's really one to immediately use a powerful way of, when you met a hurt animal, a kitty, that really can bring up your loving kindness. So now I can sort of gel the two together. So thank you very much. Also the intention and also the development of it to make it a skillful, because actually over the years being a Singaporean, I've become quite stoned. So thank you.
Thanks for sharing, Billy. Okay, if there's no other comments, I think we can wrap up here. Sorry, I'm going a little bit of overtime. So let's do a dedication. Dedication of merits. Please recite together with me. 愿消三障诸烦恼，愿得智慧真明了，普愿罪障悉消除，实是常行菩萨道。阿弥陀佛。Till we meet again, may we be guided by the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Thanks everyone for participating. Have a loving kindness day ahead.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Good day.
Bye, guys.
Thanks, Marcel.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye. See you guys next time.